I'm Pauline, 36, and I've always been the black sheep in my family of high achievers. Every Mother's Day, we gather at my parents' luxurious suburban home for what feels like an annual assessment of our worth. My mother has always valued prestigious careers and outward success, which made our relationship complicated at best. As I pulled up to the house that Sunday, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach knowing judgment awaited inside. What my family didn't know was that the Porsche GT3 RS I'd been secretly paying for 2 years was about to change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to join me for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself. I grew up in an upscale neighborhood in Connecticut, where our sprawling colonial house stood as a testament to my parents' success. My father, the brilliant neurosurgeon who worked 80-hour weeks, and my mother, a former beauty queen, who channeled her organizational skills into running charity events that were the talk of the county. Our family photo albums display perfect holiday cards and vacation photos, but they don't show the pressure cooker environment that shaped us all. My three siblings thrived under those expectations. James, my oldest brother, now 42, followed the golden path our parents laid out for him. Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Law, and now senior partner at one of New York's most prestigious law firms. His corner office overlooks Central Park, and his family is picture perfect, just like our parents wanted. Then there's Amanda, 39, who combined our mother's beauty and our father's surgical talent. She became a plastic surgeon to the stars, with a waiting list months long and features in medical journals and glossy magazines alike. Her Instagram perfect life in Los Angeles, with her investment banker husband and twin girls who attend the most exclusive private school, is exactly what success looks like in my mother's eyes. Even Daniel, my younger brother at 32, hit the jackpot with his tech startup that he sold for millions before his 30th birthday. Now he invests in other startups and lives in a sleek San Francisco penthouse with his boyfriend, an award-winning architect. Initially, my parents struggled with Daniel coming out, but his financial success quickly overshadowed any disappointment they might have felt about his sexuality. And then there's me. I was always different. While my siblings competed for academic honors and prestigious internships, I spent hours in our garage tinkering with my father's vintage Mustang when he wasn't looking. I sketched car designs instead of studying for SATs. I dreamed in curves and engines, while my family dreamed of corner offices and society pages. My mother never understood me. From childhood, her criticisms were relentless, but always wrapped in a veneer of concern. Pauline, honey, wouldn't you be more comfortable in a dress for the family photo? Everyone else looks so put together. Darling, maybe if you spent as much time on your studies as you do on those car drawings, you could get into a school that would actually lead to a career. I just worry about your future sweetheart. That art school is so expensive for something that's really just a hobby. My father was emotionally distant, working long hours, and rarely engaging beyond surface conversations about achievements and plans. But occasionally I'd catch him looking at my automotive sketches with what seemed like genuine interest, or he'd ask me to hand him tools while he worked on his car. Those tiny moments of connection were precious to me. Every family gathering revolved around showcasing accomplishments. Thanksgiving wasn't about gratitude, but about my mother orchestrating conversations to highlight everyone's recent successes. Christmas wasn't about joy, but about gifts that demonstrated status and achievement. And birthdays were opportunities for my mother to reminisce about the potential she saw in each child, and how far they'd come with pointed silence when it came to my trajectory. I tried to fit the mold, I really did. After art school, where I specialized in industrial design with a focus on automotive aesthetics, I took a corporate job designing retail displays. I lasted 8 months before the fluorescent lights and meaningless projects made me physically ill. I tried working for an advertising agency creating visuals for car commercials, but the politics and client compromises crushed my spirit. Each conventional career attempt ended the same way, with me feeling like I was suffocating. Meanwhile, my side projects restoring vintage motorcycles and customizing friends' cars were the only things that made me feel alive. After my third burnout from a quote-unquote real job, I made the decision that horrified my family. I opened a small automotive design and restoration shop. My mother's reaction was a masterclass in passive aggression. Well, I suppose someone has to change oil for people, though I did hope that expensive education would lead to something more substantial. She didn't understand that I wasn't just changing oil. I was bringing automotive history back to life, redesigning classics with modern technology, while preserving their souls, creating functional art. But in her world, if it didn't come with a prestigious title and a corner office, it wasn't success. The weight of being the family disappointment was crushing at times. Holiday gatherings became exercises in endurance, smiling through thinly veiled insults, and trying to be happy for my siblings' achievements while my own were dismissed as trivial. Every family photo session was accompanied by my mother's suggestions about how I could look more professional. Every conversation steered toward how I might finally find a quote unquote real career. For years, I carried that weight, the constant ache of knowing I was the only one who hadn't lived up to expectations. It colored everything, made me second guess my choices, and sometimes in my darkest moments, made me wonder if they were right. Was I wasting my talent? Was I just being stubborn? Was my passion really just a hobby? I was foolishly trying to turn into a livelihood, but deep down I knew they were wrong. The problem wasn't that I had failed. It was that their definition of success was too narrow to include someone like me. Everything changed 2 years ago, when Jackson Wallace brought his grandfather's 1962 Jaguar E-Type into my shop. The car was in terrible condition, having sat in a barn for decades, but Jackson wanted it restored as a tribute to his grandfather, who had recently passed away. What made this project different was that Jackson, a successful venture capitalist in his 50s, didn't just want a standard restoration. He wanted something that honored the original design while incorporating subtle modern elements. It was exactly the kind of creative challenge I lived for. Over the next 6 months, we worked closely on the project. I preserved the classic silhouette, but upgraded the engine, added discreet modern comforts, and created a custom interior that blended vintage aesthetics with contemporary craftsmanship. When I finally unveiled the finished car, Jackson was moved to tears. "This isn't just a car," he said, running his hand along the gleaming hood. "It's a time machine, a piece of art, and a tribute all in one. You have a gift, Pauline." 2 weeks later, Jackson returned with a business proposition. He wanted to invest in my shop, expand it into a proper studio, and become my business partner. He saw the potential for high-end custom restorations and designs that I had always dreamed of, but lacked the capital to pursue. His contacts in the world of luxury goods and classic car collecting would bring in the kind of clients who could appreciate and pay for the work I wanted to do. For the first time in my professional life, someone not only understood my vision, but valued it enough to invest in it. We drew up papers, renovated an old warehouse into a state-of-the-art design studio and restoration workshop, and Wallace and Turner Automotive Atelier was born. Our first major project under the new partnership was the restoration of an extremely rare 1957 Porsche 356 Speedster for a reclusive tech billionaire. The project was challenging, exhilarating, and ultimately a stunning success. Photos of the restoration were featured in several niche automotive magazines, and inquiries began coming in from serious collectors around the country. As our reputation grew, so did our client list and our prices. Within 18 months, I was making more money than I ever had doing work that I was proud of and building a name in the automotive world. For the first time in my adult life, I was thriving by every measure except the one that mattered to my family: conventional prestige. I never told them about the business transformation. After years of dismissal and belittling, I decided to let them believe what they wanted about my quote-unquote little garage business. My mother occasionally asked patronizing questions about whether I was making ends meet, and I gave vague answers that neither confirmed nor denied her assumptions. My siblings, taking cues from our mother, rarely asked about my work at all. The idea to buy my mother's dream car came to me after a particularly successful auction, where a car we had restored sold for nearly double the expected price. My mother had always coveted a Porsche GT3 RS ever since my father had considered buying one for their 25th anniversary but opted for jewelry instead, deciding the car was too impractical. She mentioned it whenever she saw one with a wistful sigh about the road not taken. With my new financial stability, I could afford the car, but it would still be a significant investment. I worked out a payment plan, putting aside a substantial portion of my profits each month for the purchase. It was a grand gesture, perhaps overly so, but after a lifetime of trying to earn her approval, I wanted to make a statement that couldn't be ignored or diminished. For 2 years, I made those payments, watching my bank account grow, and then diminish each month as another payment went toward the Porsche. I told myself it was an investment in healing our relationship, a way to finally prove my worth in terms she couldn't dismiss. Looking back, I recognize the unhealthy dynamic that drove me to such lengths, but at the time, it felt like the only language my mother would understand. As Mother's Day approached, I arranged for the final payment and delivery of the car. The timing felt symbolic, the perfect occasion to unveil my success and hopefully transform our relationship. I had the car detailed to perfection, added a custom touch with hand-stitched initials on the headrest, and prepared for what I imagined would be a tearful, joyful reconciliation. I rehearsed the moment in my mind countless times, picturing my mother's shock and delight, the respect in my siblings' eyes, my father's proud nod. In my fantasies, this grand gesture would erase years of dismissal and finally earn me my rightful place in the family hierarchy of success. What I didn't anticipate was how the day would actually unfold, or how it would become a turning point in an entirely different way than I had planned. As the business grew, I had started to gain confidence in my unconventional path. Recognition from industry experts and wealthy clients had begun to heal some of the wounds inflicted by years of family disapproval. Deep down, though, I still craved that validation from my mother, still measured my worth partly through her eyes. The Porsche wasn't just a gift, it was a bid for acceptance, a peace offering, and a statement all in one. I approached Mother's Day with nervous anticipation, hoping that this would be the moment everything changed between us. Meanwhile, my professional life continued to expand in ways my family knew nothing about. A famous musician had commissioned us to create a completely custom motorcycle based on vintage board track racers. An international design magazine was planning a feature on our fusion of preservation and innovation. Jackson and I were in talks with a luxury car manufacturer about a limited edition collaboration. I was leading a double life perceived as struggling and misguided by my family, while being increasingly respected as an innovative force in my industry. The dissonance was both painful and oddly empowering. Part of me wondered if I should just tell them everything, lay out my successes plainly, and demand the respect I'd earned. But another part, the part still wounded by years of dismissal, wanted the dramatic revelation, wanted to see the shock on their faces when they realized how wrong they'd been. So I maintained the facade, allowing them to believe I was still barely getting by with my little garage business. I let them think I was still the family failure, while secretly preparing for the moment when that narrative would be shattered forever. Mother's Day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the drive to my parents' estate in the GT3 RS. I had arranged for a friend to follow me in my regular car, so I could leave the Porsche around the corner out of sight until the big reveal. My stomach was in knots, a mix of anticipation and dread that had become the standard emotional cocktail before family gatherings. As I drove up the long circular driveway, I noted my siblings' vehicles already parked in their usual spots. James's sleek black Mercedes sedan, Amanda's white Range Rover with the custom wheels, Daniel's Tesla Model S. Each car a statement of success and status, exactly as our parents had taught us. I parked my modest daily driver, a 10-year-old Subaru, that reinforced my image as the struggling sibling, and took a deep breath before heading to the door. The sprawling colonial looked perfect as always, with fresh mulch in the flower beds and seasonal wreaths on the double front doors. My mother's attention to detail never wavered. My father answered the door, his tall frame slightly stooped now that he was in his 70s. His smile seemed genuine as he embraced me. "Pauline, good to see you. You look well." Before I could respond, my mother appeared behind him, elegant as always, in a tailored dress and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled. "Darling, you made it, though you're the last to arrive as usual." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she air-kissed near my cheek. "Those jeans are quite casual for Mother's Day, aren't they?" And there it was, not even 30 seconds, and already the criticism had begun. I swallowed my retort and handed her the small gift bag containing a scented candle, the decoy present that would precede the real surprise. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom! You look lovely!" Inside the house was filled with the delicious aromas of the elaborate meal being prepared by my mother's personal chef. She had long ago given up cooking herself, finding it more prestigious to employ a professional for family gatherings. My siblings and their partners were gathered in the sunroom, champagne flutes in hand. James stood near the windows discussing something that seemed terribly important on his phone. His wife, Catherine, a former model-turned-philanthropist, offered me a practiced smile as I entered. Amanda was showing something on her phone to her husband, Mark, both of them laughing. Daniel and his boyfriend, Thomas, were engaged in conversation with my father's sister, Aunt Lydia. "Look who finally made it," Amanda announced, glancing at her watch subtly, but obviously enough for everyone to notice. "Traffic." I lied, not mentioning the time spent parking the Porsche and coordinating with my friend. "Great to see everyone." The next hour was a masterclass in subtle exclusion. Amanda dominated the conversation with stories about her recent medical conference in Switzerland, complete with photos of her giving a keynote speech and attending exclusive dinners with pharmaceutical executives. The views from the hotel were absolutely stunning, she gushed. Though the spa treatments were so divine, I hardly wanted to leave my room. James interrupted with news about his latest high-profile case representing a tech giant in an international intellectual property dispute. The settlement negotiations alone will take months, he said with practiced humility that fooled no one. But the firm has complete confidence in my team's approach. Daniel, not to be outdone, shared the latest about his new tech ventures funding round. We're oversubscribed, actually, he explained, swirling his champagne, having to turn away investors, which is a good problem to have. When there was finally a lull, I attempted to share a bit about a restoration project I was particularly proud of. I've been working on this amazing 1970s Ferrari that was actually owned by Pauline Darling. My mother cut in. Could you help in the kitchen? I think Luis needs some serving dishes from the high cabinet. And just like that, I was dismissed my contribution to the family success showcase deemed unworthy of airtime. I caught Daniel's boyfriend Thomas giving me a sympathetic look as I left the room. As an outsider who had only been welcomed after Daniel's financial success was established, he seemed to understand the family dynamics better than most. In the kitchen, Luis the chef assured me he needed no help at all, and seemed confused by my presence. I took the moment alone to steady myself, reminding myself of what was to come. The Porsche was waiting around the corner, and soon the dynamic would shift. I just needed to get through the next few hours. When I returned to the sunroom, my mother was organizing everyone for the move to the dining room. The formal Mother's Day lunch was a tradition with assigned seating and multiple courses. As we filed in, I noticed my place card was as usual farthest from my mother down at the end, with the peripheral family members, like my cousin's new spouses, and my father's unmarried sister. The table was set with my mother's finest china crystal and silver. Fresh flowers formed an elaborate centerpiece, and personalized menus detailed the four-course meal ahead. Everything perfect, everything designed to impress. As we took our seats, I felt the familiar shrinking sensation that came with these gatherings, the way my confidence and sense of self seemed to diminish in direct proportion to my proximity to my family. But today was different. Today, I had the Porsche, the ultimate symbol of success in my mother's eyes, and the knowledge of my true achievements tucked away like a secret weapon. Extended family members arrived in waves, grandaunts and second cousins, and my parents' longtime friends, all part of the annual celebration. Each new arrival brought another opportunity for my mother to showcase her perfect children, with the implicit comparison always lingering when she came to me. And Pauline is still pursuing her interest in automobiles, she would say with a tight smile, so passionate about her hobbies. I smiled and nodded, playing my assigned role while anticipating the moment when I would flip the script entirely. As lunch began, my mother stood for her traditional toast. This was always the most dreaded part of Mother's Day, where she would publicly assess each of her children under the guise of maternal pride. She tapped her crystal glass delicately, and the table fell silent. I want to thank everyone for being here today to celebrate not just me, but this beautiful family we've created, she began, her voice carrying that performative emotion she'd perfected over years of charity speeches. As a mother, there is no greater joy than watching your children succeed. She turned first to James, her golden firstborn. James has made us proud once again with his promotion to senior partner, the youngest in the firm's history to achieve that position. She raised her glass. The Anderson legal legacy continues to thrive. James nodded modestly, though the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth betrayed his satisfaction. Next, she turned to Amanda. Our beautiful Amanda continues to revolutionize her field. Her research publication on innovative facial reconstruction techniques has been praised throughout the medical community, and her client list includes people we all recognize from magazine covers. She winked conspiratorially. Though, of course, doctor-patient confidentiality prevents her from sharing details. Amanda beamed, soaking in the praise like a plant turning towards sunlight. And Daniel, my mother continued, her voice warm with pride. Featured in Forbes 30 Under 35, his new venture has secured funding that most businesses only dream of. His vision for technology that improves lives continues to impress investors worldwide. Daniel accepted the praise with a small nod, though I noticed Thomas squeezing his hand under the table, a private gesture of support that made me wonder if Daniel was truly as comfortable with these displays as he appeared. Then my mother's gaze fell on me, and I watched the subtle but unmistakable change in her expression. The warmth cooled, the pride diminished, and her smile tightened at the corners. "I'm so blessed with successful children," she began, then paused deliberately. "Well, most of them." She stared directly at me as she delivered the blow, and a ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved around the table. My Aunt Lydia looked down at her plate. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Amanda didn't bother hiding her smirk while Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. James maintained his neutral expression, ever the lawyer careful not to reveal his position. The moment crystallized everything that had been wrong in our family dynamic for decades. The public humiliation, the casual cruelty disguised as a joke, the implicit permission for everyone to view me as the family failure. I felt heat rise from my chest to my face, the physical manifestation of shame that had become so familiar at these gatherings. In past years, I might have forced a laugh to ease the tension, or excused myself to the bathroom to compose myself, or even tried to defend my choices, only to have them further diminished. But today, with the Porsche waiting around the corner and 2 years of secret success behind me, something shifted inside. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to explain the value of my work or the passion that drove me. I simply smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to confuse my mother momentarily. The moment stretched as everyone waited for my reaction, the anticipated embarrassment or awkward attempt at humor. Instead, I maintained eye contact with my mother, my smile unwavering, and took a sip of my water. "I hope the coming year brings you all continued success," my mother finished, lamely thrown off by my unexpected response. The meal continued with strained conversation. My cousin Jeffrey asked about Amanda's twins. My uncle Roger discussed his recent golf trip with my father, and my mother directed the staff to serve the next course. I ate quietly, participating minimally in the conversation, which was nothing unusual. What was unusual was the calm. I felt the absence of the hurt that normally accompanied these gatherings. As I sat there, memories flooded back of similar moments over the years. My high school graduation, where my mother had commented that at least my art scholarship meant they wouldn't have to pay full tuition. My college exhibition, where she had asked if my automotive designs could be adapted for something more practical like kitchen appliances. The countless Christmas gifts of business attire and self-help books about finding a quote-unquote real career. The pattern was clear, consistent, and today it would end. I excused myself during the dessert course, saying I needed to use the restroom. Instead, I went to my mother's pristine home office and found a note card and envelope from her monogram stationery set. I wrote my note carefully, included the necessary documents, and sealed the envelope. When I returned to the dining room, everyone was finishing their desserts, and my mother was preparing for the gift-giving ceremony, another tradition where the spotlight would shine on my siblings' thoughtful, expensive presents, while mine would be deemed sweet but simple. I felt a strange calm descend over me, a clarity I had never experienced in this house before. For years, I had been playing a game I could never win, seeking approval that would never be granted, and measuring my worth against standards that were designed to exclude me. But today, the game would change. As the meal concluded, my mother orchestrated the move to the living room for the gift presentation ceremony. This annual ritual was designed to showcase not just the children's love for their mother, but their financial success and thoughtfulness, qualities my mother valued above all else. We arranged ourselves on the expensive furnishings, with my mother taking her usual place in what we all privately called the throne, a wingback chair positioned to give her the best view of everyone. My father stood behind her hand, resting on the chair back, the supportive spouse role he had perfected over 4 decades of marriage. "Who would like to go first?" my mother asked, though it wasn't really a question. The gift-giving always proceeded in birth order, another of her unwritten but inflexible rules. James presented first, handing over a small box from Tiffany. Inside was a platinum and diamond bracelet that matched the necklace and earrings he had given her for Christmas and her birthday. "To complete the set," he said as my mother exclaimed over the gift with practiced delight. "James, it's exquisite!" she gushed, immediately putting it on and holding out her wrist to catch the light. "You always know exactly what I love." Amanda went next, presenting a large, professionally wrapped package. My mother opened it to reveal a custom portrait of herself, painted by an artist whose work hung in several national galleries. "I commissioned it 6 months ago," Amanda explained. "The artist normally has a 3-year waiting list, but I treated his wife after a car accident, and he was kind enough to move me up." The implication that her medical skills had secured this coup was not lost on anyone. "It's stunning," my mother breathed, already eyeing the wall where it would hang. The perfect addition to the main hallway. Daniel's gift was typically innovative, a digital photo frame that used some proprietary technology from one of his investments. It was preloaded with family photos spanning decades, curated and enhanced by professional editors. It uses AI to arrange the photos based on viewer preferences, and even generates music that matches the emotional tone of each image, he explained as my mother marveled at the changing display. "So clever," she praised. "You always bring the future into our home, Daniel." Then all eyes turned to me, the last in line as always. In previous years, my gifts had been heartfelt but modest, reflecting both my limited budget and my different values. Handmade items, carefully selected books, once a weekend cooking class, we could take together an attempt at connection that she had rescheduled 3 times before ultimately canceling. This year, I approached her chair and handed her the simple envelope with her name written on the front. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," I said, my voice steady and warm. She took the envelope with visible disappointment. In our family, small envelopes usually meant gift cards, the last resort of the uninspired or budget-constrained. She opened it with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, this is thoughtful," she began before actually reading what was inside. Her expression shifted from polite disappointment to confusion as she scanned the contents. I didn't wait to see the full realization dawn. Instead, I turned and walked out of the living room, through the foyer and out the front door. Behind me, I heard the murmur of confused voices rise, but I didn't look back. With each step away from the house, I felt lighter. The walk to the corner where the Porsche waited felt like a procession, a ceremony marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. My friend who had waited with the car gave me a thumbs up and took my keys to drive my old Subaru home. The Porsche GT3 RS gleamed in the afternoon sun, its racing yellow paint job impossible to miss. I ran my hand along the perfect curve of the hood, appreciating not just the machine itself, but what it represented. This was the physical embodiment of my success, the tangible proof of what I had accomplished on my own terms. I slid into the driver's seat, the custom leather embracing me like an old friend. The engine roared to life with a sound that always made my heart race. This was no ordinary vehicle. It was automotive perfection, the pinnacle of engineering and design, and now it belonged to my mother. I drove slowly back up the circular driveway, watching as faces appeared in windows and doorways. My father stood frozen on the front steps, the note in his hand now, as my mother must have thrust it at him in shock. James and Amanda pushed past him to stare open-mouthed as I brought the car to a stop directly in front of the house. My mother appeared at the door, her face a mask of confusion and disbelief. She held the papers from the envelope, gripping them so tightly her knuckles were white. Our eyes met through the windshield, and I saw something I had never seen directed at me before, a look of utter bewilderment that bordered on respect. I gave a small wave and pulled away, not racing off dramatically, but driving with deliberate calm, making the statement that this wasn't impulsive or emotional, but a calculated decision 2 years in the making. As I turned onto the main road, my phone began to ring. My mother's name and photo filled the screen. I connected the call through the car's Bluetooth system, her voice filling the luxurious interior. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice shrill with emotion. "Is this some kind of joke? The registration, the insurance, the other papers? What game are you playing, Pauline?" "No game, Mom," I replied calmly. "The car is yours, paid in full. The registration and insurance are in your name. Consider it recognition of how blessed you are to have 4 successful children, not just 3. "But how could you possibly afford? The note says you've been making payments for 2 years, but that's not possible with your little garage business. And what's all this about magazine features and celebrity clients? Wallace and Turner Automotive Atelier isn't a little garage business, Mom. It's one of the most sought-after custom automotive design studios in the country. Those papers include press features you might want to read and an invitation to our upcoming gallery showing. I thought it was time you knew the truth about what I actually do." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear her mind racing to reconcile her perception of my career with this new reality. "Why didn't you tell us?" she finally asked, her voice smaller now. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have found a way to diminish it, to categorize it as less than what James or Amanda or Daniel do? Some things need to be seen to be believed, Mom. Enjoy the Porsche. I know how long you've wanted one." I ended the call and turned off my phone. The road ahead stretched out invitingly, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt truly free of the weight of my family's judgment. I drove to my apartment above my design studio, a converted warehouse space that was both my home and creative sanctuary. As I parked and made my way upstairs, emotions washed over me in waves. Triumph at finally standing up for myself. Sadness for the relationship with my mother that might never be what I had hoped. Relief at no longer maintaining the facade. And most surprisingly, freedom from the need for her approval that had driven me for so long. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the large windows overlooking the city. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, was flooded with notifications, text messages, and voicemails from family members. I set it aside, not ready to engage with their reactions just yet. This moment was mine, and I wanted to savor the complex emotions that came with finally breaking free from a lifetime of seeking approval I would never receive. The week that followed was a storm of communications from my family. Each sibling reached out in their own characteristic way, their messages revealing as much about them as their reactions to what had happened. James sent a formal text message that read like a legal brief. I understand you've achieved significant professional success. While your method of revealing this information was unnecessarily dramatic and potentially hurtful to Mother, I acknowledge your accomplishments. We should discuss this situation like adults. Lunch next week. Amanda's reaction was predictably self-centered and bitter. She left a voicemail dripping with passive aggression. Well, look who decided she's too good for family now, buying a Porsche to show off. Really classy, Pauline. Mom's upset not that you seem to care. Some of us express love without having to make a scene. Call me when you're done with your little rebellion. Daniel's response surprised me the most. He texted first a simple message. Holy shit, sis, boss move, can we talk? When I called him back, his excitement was genuine. Why didn't you tell me about your business? I had no idea you were doing work at that level. I just Googled your studio and the cars are incredible. That Ferrari restoration that was in Auto Enthusiast last month was yours. We need to talk about collaborating. I have some ideas for integrating tech into classic car restoration that would be perfect for your clientele. His reaction was refreshing, focused on the work itself rather than the family drama. For the first time, he was treating me as a peer rather than the struggling younger sister who couldn't get her act together. We made plans to meet for dinner later in the week, a first step toward a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than family hierarchy. My father's response came on day 3, not through a call or text, but in person. I was at the studio reviewing design sketches with my team when Jackson came to tell me my father was in the reception area. I found him standing awkwardly by the displays of our previous projects, studying the photographs and scale models with an intensity that suggested he was seeing them with new eyes. Dad, I greeted him, uncertain what to expect. This is a surprise. He turned, and I was struck by how much older he looked in this moment outside the familiar context of their home. Pauline, I hope I'm not interrupting. No, we just finished a meeting. Would you like a tour? He nodded, and I led him through the studio space, explaining our process, introducing him to key team members, and showing him current projects. He asked thoughtful questions about engineering challenges and design decisions, engaging with my work in a way he never had before. In the restoration bay, he paused in front of a partially disassembled Aston Martin, running his hand along the exposed frame with appreciation. This is remarkable work, he said quietly. Truly exceptional. Thank you. I replied, the words feeling inadequate for the validation I'd sought for so long. We ended up in my office, a space that reflected both my professional success and personal aesthetic, with vintage automotive art on the walls, awards on shelves, and large windows overlooking the workshop floor. Your mother asked me to come, he admitted, finally sitting in one of the leather chairs across from my desk. She wanted me to convince you to apologize for making a scene at Mother's Day. And will you? I asked, bracing myself for disappointment. He sighed suddenly, looking tired. No, that's not why I came. I came because I needed to see this for myself. I needed to understand what you've built here. Silence stretched between us, comfortable in a way our silences rarely were. I should have protected you more, he said finally. From her criticism, from the comparisons. I knew they were hurting you, and I did nothing. Why didn't you? I asked the question I'd wanted to ask for decades. Fear mostly, he admitted. I'm a coward, Pauline. I built a career cutting into people's brains, but never had the courage to stand up to my own wife when she was hurting our child. It was easier to focus on work to pretend I didn't see. His honesty was unexpected and disarming. I used to think you agreed with her, I confessed, that you were just as disappointed in me. He shook his head emphatically. Never. I always admired your courage, the way you followed your passion despite everything. I was too much of a coward to do that myself. I became a surgeon because that's what my father expected, and I pushed James toward law for the same reason, the family legacy. He gestured around the studio. But you broke free, created something truly yours. I've always been proud of that, even if I never said it. We talked for nearly 2 hours, having the first real conversation of our adult lives. He told me stories of his own thwarted interest in mechanical engineering dreams, set aside for practicality and expectations. I shared the journey of building my business, the challenges and triumphs. When he left, something had shifted between us, a new foundation laid for whatever came next. My mother maintained her silence until day 6, when she appeared unannounced at the studio late in the afternoon. I was alone finishing some design sketches when Jackson messaged me that she was insisting on seeing me. She stood in the reception area looking both imperious and uncertain, a combination I had never seen in her before. She wore one of her typical designer outfits, but her usual perfect composure seemed slightly fractured. "Pauline," she acknowledged me stiffly. "Mom, this is a surprise." "Yes, well, I've been driving the Porsche," she said, as if this explained her presence. "And how is it?" "Magnificent," she admitted, a flash of genuine pleasure crossing her face before she controlled it. "Though I'm still learning all the features." I nodded, waiting. We both knew she hadn't come just to discuss the car. "Perhaps I could see your facility," she suggested, falling back on the formal language she used when uncertain. I gave her the tour, watching as her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise as she took in the scale and sophistication of the operation. In the design studio, she paused in front of the wall, displaying magazine features and press about our work. "This is all yours," she asked, gesturing to the articles and photographs. "Mine and my business partners. We've built it over the last 2 years." 2 years, she echoed. "And you never said anything." I met her gaze directly. "Would you have been interested if I had?" She looked away first. "I might have been." We continued the tour, ending in my office, as I had with my father. Unlike him, she perched on the edge of the chair, maintaining her perfect posture, as if afraid to relax into the space. "Your father tells me you've built something impressive here," she said finally. "We have. And these clients, they're all—" She searched for the right word. "Significant people." I almost laughed at her inability to let go of status even in this moment. "Some are well known, yes. Others are simply passionate collectors and enthusiasts who appreciate our work." She nodded, absorbing this. "The car is too generous a gift. I can't accept it. It's already registered in your name. The insurance is paid for the year. It's yours, Mom." "Why would you do this?" After what I said at lunch. For the first time, she seemed to recognize the cruelty of her toast, though she couldn't quite bring herself to call it what it was. "I've been planning it for 2 years, long before Mother's Day. I wanted you to have something you've always wanted, and I wanted you to know that I could provide it, that I am successful, just not in the way you define success." She was quiet for a long time, studying her perfectly manicured hands. "I don't understand your world," she said finally. "Cars and machines and getting your hands dirty. It was always so foreign to me." "I know," I acknowledged, "but that doesn't make it less valuable or meaningful." "No," she agreed reluctantly. "I suppose it doesn't." She straightened, pulling her composure back around her like armor. "Your father and I would like you to come to dinner next week, just the three of us. You could tell us more about your business." It wasn't an apology. Knowing my mother, it might be the closest thing to one I would ever receive. But it was an overture, an acknowledgement, and perhaps the beginning of something new. "I'd like that," I said simply. She stood to leave, pausing at the door. "The car really is magnificent, Pauline. Thank you." After she left, I sat in my office, looking out over the workshop floor where my team was packing up for the day. The conversation had been awkward, halting, and nowhere near the tearful reconciliation I had once imagined. But it was real, perhaps the first truly real exchange we'd had in years. Not warm, not entirely comfortable, but authentic, in a way our carefully scripted interactions had never been. I realized then that true validation had never needed to come from her, that I had found it in my work, my clients, my team, and most importantly, in myself. The Porsche hadn't bought her love or even her full respect, but it had disrupted a decades-long pattern and opened a door to something different, something that might with time and effort on both sides grow into a healthier relationship. 6 months later, as Thanksgiving approached, I found myself in a very different place than I had been the previous year. Wallace and Turner Automotive Atelier had continued to flourish with our feature in Auto Design Monthly, bringing in a new level of high-profile clients. We had expanded the team, adding 3 new designers and 2 master technicians to keep up with demand. The gallery showing we had invited my parents to had been a turning point in how they viewed my work. Seeing wealthy collectors and industry experts admiring our creations, hearing the praise and watching the bidding for our limited commission slots had finally convinced my mother that what I did was not just legitimate, but prestigious in its own right. Our relationship had evolved into something I would describe as respectfully distant, but improving. We had dinner together once a month, sometimes just the 3 of us, sometimes with my siblings. She made visible efforts to ask about my projects and listen to my answers, though I could tell she still didn't fully understand my passion. But she was trying, and that was more than I had ever expected. James and I had reached a detente of sorts. He had come to the studio to apologize for underestimating me in his formal way, and had even referred a couple of his wealthy clients to me for restoration projects. Our relationship would never be warm, but there was a new professional respect that made family gatherings less tense. Amanda remained Amanda, unable to see beyond her own narrative. She had sent a backhanded compliment after seeing the Auto Design Monthly feature, saying she was surprised and impressed that my hobby had gained such recognition. I had learned to accept that some relationships couldn't be fundamentally changed, and to set boundaries accordingly. My relationship with Daniel had transformed completely. After seeing my studio, he had become my biggest cheerleader within the family. We had begun collaborating on a project integrating advanced technology into classic car dashboards in a way that preserved their vintage aesthetic while adding modern functionality. Working together had created a bond that transcended our shared history, allowing us to know each other as adults rather than through the lens of childhood roles. Beyond family, my life had expanded in other ways. I had formed friendships with other business owners and creatives who understood the passion that drove me. I had begun mentoring a young woman who showed remarkable talent for automotive design, but faced barriers in the male-dominated field. There was even the possibility of romance on the horizon. Ryan, an architectural salvage specialist I had met while sourcing materials for a custom interior, had asked me to dinner after several professional collaborations, had revealed our shared passion for preserving the beauty of the past while creating something new. We had been dating for 2 months, taking things slow, both of us wary after previous relationships that had faltered under the demands of our unconventional careers. As Thanksgiving approached, I found myself preparing for the family gathering with anticipation rather than dread for the first time in memory. I would drive my own restored vintage Jaguar rather than trying to appear more or less successful than I was. I would bring Ryan, introducing him as my date without seeking approval. I would engage with my family as an equal, not as the perpetual disappointment seeking validation. The morning of Thanksgiving, I stood in my apartment looking out over the city as the sun rose. The light caught the chrome details of the cars in our lot below, creating prisms of color against the brick walls. I thought about how far I had come, not just professionally, but personally. For years, I had defined myself in relation to my family's expectations, measuring my worth against their yardstick, and invariably coming up short. The Porsche gesture had been both an attempt to finally meet those expectations and a declaration of independence from them. The irony wasn't lost on me that my final bid for approval had also been my first step toward not needing it anymore. As I prepared for the day ahead, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. Success wasn't about titles or prestige, or even recognition. It was about building something authentic, something that aligned with your values and vision. It was about creating work that spoke to your soul, and finding people who appreciated that work for what it was, not what it represented on someone else's scale of achievement. Family wounds never fully heal, I had learned. They scar over, becoming less painful, but always remaining part of your story. My mother would never be the warmly supportive parent I had craved as a child. My relationship with Amanda might always be strained by competition. James would probably never fully understand my choices, but those limitations didn't define me anymore. I had built a life rich with purpose, creativity, and increasingly love. I had found my own measure of success, one that couldn't be diminished by anyone else's opinion. As I drove to my parents' house that Thanksgiving, the Jaguar's engine purring beneath me, I felt a profound sense of peace. The circular driveway where I had made my dramatic exit 6 months earlier now held no emotional charge. It was just a driveway, and the house was just a house, not the arena for approval I had once perceived it to be. My mother greeted me at the door, her eyes widening appreciatively at the sight of the Jaguar. "Beautiful car," she said, and I heard the genuine admiration in her voice. "Thank you," I replied simply. "I restored it myself." She nodded, stepping back to let me and Ryan enter. No criticism of my clothes, no comment on my timing, just a simple welcome. Inside, the dynamic had shifted subtly but significantly. Daniel immediately drew Ryan into conversation about his architectural work. My father asked detailed questions about the Jaguar's restoration process. Even James made an effort, inquiring about a recent article mentioning our studio's innovative approach to sustainability and restoration. Amanda remained Amanda, making a point to mention her latest television appearance. But I found her need for attention almost endearing now rather than threatening. Her behavior said more about her than it did about me. When my mother rose for the traditional Thanksgiving toast, I felt a momentary tension, a muscle memory of past hurts. But her words surprised me. "I'm thankful today for this family in all its complexity and with all its differences," she said, meeting each of our eyes in turn. When she came to me, there was something new in her gaze, something that looked almost like respect. "I'm thankful for the many forms of success represented at this table and for the courage it takes to follow your own path." It wasn't a direct apology for years of dismissal, but coming from my mother, it was revolutionary. As we ate and talked and shared, I realized that while the past couldn't be undone, the future was unwritten. Each interaction was an opportunity to build something healthier, to relate to each other as the adults we had become, rather than the roles we had played. Looking around the table at my complex, imperfect family, I understood that true freedom comes not from winning approval, but from no longer needing it. Success isn't measured in accolades or possessions, but in authenticity and purpose. And family, with all its messiness and history, can evolve when even one person changes the pattern. What about you? Have you ever had to redefine success on your own terms, or stand up to family expectations that didn't fit who you really are? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to follow their own path. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the most important approval will always be your own.